Good morning and welcome to University of Toronto International Summer Academy. My name is Jelena and I'll be your host. This morning in the studio, I have students from Global Citizenship program. And this summer, they are researching about food insecurity and food waste. Specifically, they're looking at food waste in United States. But before we dive into their research, I would just like to go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Hello everyone, my name is Kyle. I come from China. 你好，我来自中国，我叫 Kyle.
你好，我係劉子希，我喺香港嚟嘅。Hello, I'm Hayden, and I'm from Hong Kong.
こんにちは。私の名前はShoichiroです。日本から来ました。Hi, my name is Sho. I'm from Japan.
Hola, me llamo Ken y soy de Estados Unidos, Japón y México. Hi, my name is Ken. I'm from Japan, Mexico, and the U.S.
Thank you and welcome. Welcome for joining us this morning. So let's start talking about what is the current situation in United States when it comes to food waste. And also, I would like you to just explain the reason why you chose specifically the states to look at food waste and focus your research on.
Yeah, so collectively, as a group, we decided to choose the U.S. as our country, not only because we have someone from the U.S. with us here, but, currently, the U.S. is extremely involved within the geopolitical space, especially regarding, Trump's recent presidency, which has led to changes in the political, the economic, the social, and the environmental impact on the U.S. So this is why we kind of want to focus on, how these impacts are actually affecting the food waste issue within the United States. So before we begin, I'd like to define food waste. Food waste is the disposal of edible food at any stage of the supply chain, contributing to environmental, economic, and social challenges.
Wonderful.
Currently in the United States, we throw away 65 million tons of food every single year. And guess what? All that food wasted does not just disappear. It piles up in landfills. This becomes the biggest contributing factor to trash in the country. But here's the worst part. As it rots, it poisons our planet by releasing dangerous greenhouse gases.
Well, adding on to what Sho said, when food breaks down into landfills, it releases methane. And methane is a greenhouse gas that is 28 to 36 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. These emissions from our food waste alone are equal to about 37 million cars or 42 coal-fired power plants. Additionally, it's not just about the waste. It's about what it takes to grow the food in the first place. Farmers clear thousands of acres of forests, natural habits, just to produce the food that ends up in our plates. Wasting this food means we are destroying ecosystems, killing wildlife, and shrinking biodiversity, all for nothing.
Yeah, and just to put into perspective, what Sho and Ken said, in the U.S., approximately 30 to 40% of the food supply is being wasted each year, which equates to about 119 billion pounds of food. This waste accounts for about $408 billion worth of food annually, which is a huge waste of funds, which could be used, more effectively, right? And about 35% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten annually, which equates to about 219 pounds of waste per person per year. The annual amount of food wasted in the U.S. could fill about 730 football stadiums. Food waste also represents a massive waste of resources, including the water, energy, and labor used to produce, transport, and store the food. Resources which could have been used more effectively to address food insecurity and other societal needs.
Every year, Americans throw away around 119 billion pounds of edible food. This food people could have eaten, but it ends up in landfills. When this food rots, it produces toxic methane gas, which is bad for our climate. At the same time, millions of Americans don't have enough food to eat. This food waste also costs about $408 billion each year. Imagine what we could do with the money. Plus, when we waste the food, we waste the water, land, and energy used to grow it. Right now, 35% of our food waste in the U.S. It shows how our habits of buying too much and not planning well lead to huge losses.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information. And you already actually mentioned some of the effects, which we're going to talk about in more depth shortly. But before we do so, I'm curious, what causes all of this food waste and why is it happening?
So, some of the leading causes of food waste in the United States are mostly revolving around human behaviors and their habits. This is where American citizens are likely to misunderstand food labels and their expiration dates. For example, sell by, use by, expires on, best before, and best by, which confuse most communities. And in most cases, they will throw the product away to avoid against any risk of foodborne illnesses.
So continuing on to what Sho said, I'd like to focus more on like the social reasons on why food waste is, such a big issue in the U.S. First of all, I believe that a huge reason why there is so much food waste in the U.S. is because of cultural norms. Within the U.S., there has been a growing demand for aesthetically perfect food. And, just to give an example, right? For example, you have a box of, let's say, cereal, one which is in near mint condition, and the other one probably has like a dent in the corner, or it's just something like that. The one which is like more aesthetically pleasing, which is the perfect one, is going to get sold rather than the one which has a defect, which also leads to my next issue, which is retail practices, where supermarkets discard unsold or imperfect produce in order to maintain cosmetic standards. And then, of course, there's another issue, which is the food service industries, where restaurants, hotels, and institutions waste large amounts of food through overproduction and huge portion sizes.
So adding on to what Hayden said, one big cause of food waste in America is how we shop. Being from the US and experiencing this, I can say that a lot of people go to the store without a grocery list or any kind of meal plan. This leads to impulse buyings, like grabbing extra fruits, veggies, or new products just because the way that it looks. But the problem is that perishable items such as produce and dairy tend to get spoiled before the actual use. We buy with good intentions, but then life gets busy, and then food ends up sitting in the fridge until it gets bad. Another factor is how popular bulk shopping has become in the US. Places like Costco or Sam's Club tend to sell food in a huge amount of packages at lower prices. It may feel like a great deal at the moment, but it's actually not. Because with all that food that we're purchasing, with all that bulk, it leads to additional and even more waste.
So, why is the food waste such a hard problem to solve? One big reason is that the US does not have a strong national policies or law to reduce food waste. Some countries have a clear goals to cut food waste, but in America, most actions are only local and small scale. Another problem is about food donation laws. Many restaurants and stores are afraid to donate actual food because they're worried about being sued. If someone gets sick, even if the food is still good. This fear stops a lot of safe food from reaching people who need it. Without national rules or protect the donor, companies would rather throw food away than take the risk.
So adding on to that, and as I mentioned, you already talked and touched upon some of these effects. I'm curious to find out also which demographic is affected by this the most, and if you can, or if you want to elaborate on some of these effects a little bit more.
Yeah, first of all, we would like to focus on the demographics, right? So like who is actually being affected by this food waste within the US? So first of all, there's the farmers, the producers, and the manufacturers, right? They definitely do face financial losses when crops are being left unharvested due to either market demand or appearance standards or just overproduction. Then of course there's the lower income families who struggle to afford food while edible surplus is being wasted. So you can think of it's really quite counterintuitive how we have so much money that's like in food that's being wasted when there's so many people who can't afford to have food in the first place, right? It's just extremely counterintuitive, which highlights the inequalities in food distribution. Then there's the retail workers and the food industry employees who do also suffer as they experience, job insecurity when there's waste-related inefficiencies, which hurt business profitability. So, in this current economy, especially in the restaurant industry, right? Profits are being prioritized rather than prioritizing managing food waste or environmentally friendly practices, which are quite honestly they're being a bit neglected nowadays.
Yeah, and also, why does it matter so much for our future? Well, wasting food today causes problems tomorrow. First, it makes food price go up. When there's a less stable food supply, prices rise, and poor families can't afford good food. Some people even profit from high price while others suffers. And second, wasting food also means wasting water, land, and energy, which makes it harder to grow enough food in the future. And in the end, food waste adds to climate change. It causes more greenhouse gases, which then lead to extreme weather like flood and dangerous. This damage farms and makes food production even harder.
So, adding on to what Kyle said, food waste also contributes to climate changes, such as production of energy to burn the waste which generate greenhouse gases, where 11% of the world's emissions come from. Also, such as methane, carbon dioxide, and CFCs, which present global warming. Then, foods that sit in the landfills produce nitrogen pollution, causing algae blooms and dead zones.
Adding on to what Sho said, a lot of food waste ends up in landfills, as mentioned before, which are most located near low-income neighborhoods. That means that these communities tend to deal with more pollution, bad air quality, and also suffer from poor water. Even though they tend to waste less food themselves, they are the ones who are affected the most in these situations. Additionally, diving into the more local scale, about 40% of food across Maryland high schools tend to be wasted. This results in a loss of not only food, but loss of food revenue which can be used for other necessary things. This also connects back to the point which leads to more harmful pollutants into the air, like mentioned before, methane.
So it's kind of like a domino effect. There's so many things that are affected by just throwing food, correct? And I know that part of your research is actually looking at the solutions that are being implemented both on grassroots, but also on government and policy levels. And next week, you're going to be looking at these solutions more closely in your advocacy campaign and also offering your own solution to this very, very big problem. But I'm curious if you found any solutions that are being implemented at this moment. And if you can just share a few. And also, if you can also tell us how solving this issue with food waste and then targeting the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, zero waste, how are we, speaking of domino effect, how does that affect other sustainable goals?
So currently in the United States, 6 states are leading the change: California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Vermont's universal recycling law, established in 2020, bans food waste in landfills entirely. New York now requires businesses to separate organic waste, keeping 100,000 tons of food out of landfills yearly. The EPA, United States Environmental Protection Agency, food recovery grading is a 5-tier grade level system which shows the best ways to fight waste. The first one being source reduction, buying only what you need, where less excess equals less trash. The second one being feeding hungry people, redirecting edible food to shelters instead of dumpsters. And then feeding animals, which turns scraps into farm food, which is a simple yet very effective change. And industrial use, this is where composting creates a biofuel and enriches soil. And the last resort, food going into landfills, which is a goal to avoid at all costs. The EP's actions and state policies like Vermont's landfill ban and New York's organic waste laws also connect with the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 12. This goal aims to cut in half the global food waste by 2030. These efforts show how much the state's progress against worldwide sustainability goals. The EPA's Act for Food Recovery from Source Reduction to Landfill Rerouting directly advances SDG 12 by cutting food waste while also conserving resources. State composting laws and business food donations in the states are not just them following local laws, but they are part of a global act for a sustainable environment.
Yeah, so diving deeper into the more local scale actions to battle food waste, I wanted to share something a little bit more personal because I feel like I've been a part of a solution myself. Growing up to a Montessori school from a really young age, I was taught to see food as a part of a bigger cycle, not just something you eat and throw away. At school, we didn't just learn about composting in science class, we actually did it every day. We grew vegetables in our gardens, harvested them, ate them, and then composted the leftovers. That compost turned into nutrient-rich soil, that which we use in garden beds for the next season. It was a full circle, and being part of that process made me way more intentional about how much food I took and how much I left behind. We even talked about things like methane from landfills and how composting helps cut down on those emissions. But it wasn't just an individual thing. We shared that what we learned with younger students, and even with other schools in the area. It created this ripple effect, one school community teaching another, and the message spreading outwards. That's why I think that one thing that's very important is education. I think education like this is such a powerful tool in fighting food waste. It builds lifelong habits, gets people involved early, and actually keeps waste out of landfills in a sustainable way. It's more than just a school project. It's a system that works, and it starts off small but has a real long-term impact. And what's cool is that this connects with a Maryland state law. As of January 2023, there is a law regarding big food waste producers like school, grocery stores, and cafeterias to compost or donate their food scraps instead of sending them to landfills, if they're more than 30 miles of an organic recycling facility. So the small things we did at school, they're now part of a way bigger solution. This just shows how local actions and policy can actually work together, starting with what's taught in this classroom and backed up by the state law at the state level.
Yeah, so apart from what Sho and Ken mentioned a bit earlier, I would also like to talk about another top-down approach that the U.S. is using to currently tackle the food insecurity and the food waste issue, but through using a combination of federal programs, community initiatives, and policy reforms. Programs such as the SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and the WIC provide essential nutritional assistance to low-income families, while the USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, is working to improve access to fresh, healthy food in underserved areas through initiatives like the Healthy Food Financing Initiative. And to address food waste, the USDA and the EPA, which Sho mentioned a bit earlier, have set an ambitious national goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030, encouraging businesses, farms, and consumers to adopt sustainable practices. Additionally, nonprofit organizations such as Feeding America partner with food producers and retailers to recover surplus food and distribute it to those in need. Some states and cities are also implementing composting programs and food waste bans to reduce what ends up in landfills. However, persistent challenges like poverty, racial inequality, and inadequate infrastructure continue to slow down the progress, highlighting the need for a more comprehensive, inclusive, and long-term solutions to these interconnected issues.
Yes, and I would like to see the bottom-up approach. This means start with a small action by individuals, communities, and small business. For example, people can plan their meals, store food properly, and share extra food with others. Also, school, farms, and shops can run programs to teach students and customers not to waste the food. City government can give money or support to those programs. Over time, those local actions grow bigger and catch the attention of states or national leaders, which can lead to stronger policies. A great example is D-Town Farmers in Detroit. It is a 7-acre city farm run by the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. They grow up over 30 types of fruits and vegetables to help people in their community have a better access to healthy food and take control over their own food system. This shows how small local projects can make a real difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information. And it's actually very encouraging to hear about all these solutions that are already being implemented. And I'm also looking forward to hearing about some of your ideas and how your group is planning to tackle food waste in the United States. And I also want to thank everyone in the studio for joining me this morning and for sharing their research. And to all of our audience, thank you so much for listening. And until the next time, bye.
You've been listening to the ISA Global Citizenship Podcast, which is a component our students produce in the International Summer Academy at New College at the University of Toronto. If you're interested in this program, please visit us at internationalprograms.utoronto.ca.